Hey guys, in this video, we're gonna build a basic side table. This is the project that got me going as a craftsman. I built a dining room table as my very first project, and from there I just was able to increase my skills. My hope is that this video will help you do the same. The skills here will transfer to building dining tables, coffee tables, side tables, nightstands, really most furniture. And from there, once you've got the basic skills, you can level up and build better furniture. Follow along with me and enjoy the video. Okay guys, so the first thing that I like to do when making a table, whether it is a dining table or a coffee table, side table, any table, is get my tabletop set and ready to go. So we're gonna be using simple pine in this project for our basic table. I've got a 1x12 here, and I've got another 1x6, and we're gonna be edge gluing those together to make the top. So we're gonna cut them close to size. We wanna leave them a little bit long, and then once they're all glued up and planed out, then we can cut them down to the exact size that we want. So we'll start there. So we'll start by cross-cutting these down to the length that I want my table to be. The table is going to be finished size 18 by 14. So I'm gonna actually cut these to 20 inches. I have that little bit extra to play with, just in case one of my glue ups isn't exact, or maybe one of my ends isn't quite perfect. So we'll start with this board. I'm looking at the end. I wanna make sure that I cut it square, and I can see I've got a little bit of checking on the end, so I'm gonna go ahead and just cut that off. Then we'll measure out to 20 inches. One by 6 here. Same thing, we're gonna square out that end. Okay, so the 1x6 is gonna get ripped down so that it can go on both sides of the 1x12, just so that I have a symmetrical piece. You don't have to do this, but I like to have my tabletop symmetrical. Okay, so our pieces are cut down to rough size. Now we want to make sure that they're going to fit together well. So what we're going to do is just put them in the order that they're going to go and look at them. And what I'm looking for is when I squeeze them together, are there any cracks in the board? So there's a gap right here, so I'm going to need to joint this edge and this edge. You can also kind of flip it around and see if it's just that board's edge is a little ugly. And then it's just helpful to draw a triangle on here so that you can see where your board is going to line up. Okay, so after I joint it, I can see which edges I had, and I can always get them back in the same spot. So to join our boards together, you can just straight edge glue them and clamp them, and that'll work. But if you have access to a biscuit joiner or a plate joiner, it's a good idea to just throw a few biscuits in there. That'll help keep them together, keep them in line. So here's how we do that. First, I'm gonna take my board and I'm gonna mark where I'm gonna put my biscuits. Line up the old arrow there, Okay, and on to glue up now. If you have access to bar clamps are gonna be your good friend in order to get your tabletop flat. It's gonna give it a nice flat surface, and it's gonna give it clamping pressure across the joint. Often I recommend just taking a little bit of blue tape and slapping it on there just to keep any squeeze out from gluing down to your clamps. Okay, so set your board in there so that the glue joints are perpendicular to the clamping pressure so that it clamps it in nice and tight. You're gonna separate these back out again. Little bit of glue. Make sure you get it down in that biscuit slot there. And then just spread it around so you get nice even gluing all the way across the joint. Just enough pressure to get that squeeze out. So while the tabletop glue is drying, we're gonna go ahead and get started on the base of the table. Now, because this is a simple, do-it-yourself kind of a project, table project, we're gonna use box store lumber. We're gonna use a 2x4 for the legs. We're gonna cut them down to size, to length, and then we're gonna take them over to the table. We're gonna rip them in half, so instead of being a 2x4, they're gonna become a 2x2 with squared edges. To the chops. Okay, so again, first thing we wanna do, we wanna clean this end up. Now our legs are gonna be 23¼ inch tall. That way, when we add our 3/4 inch tabletop, we're gonna be right at 24 inches tall. Okay, so you can see on this 2x4 that we have rounded edges. We want to rip those right off of the board. So we're going to try to get rid of these rounded edges, and we're also going to cut it down the center so that we get a nice square board. Hit them with some sandpaper to clean up the edges and clean up any rough spots, and move on. also a good idea just to grab a piece of scrap sandpaper, something of a higher grit, and just hit those edges, knock them down just a little bit so that they don't chip or show dents quite as bad in the finished product. Okay, so we have to repeat that whole process now that we just did with the legs to create the stretchers for the table. Now the stretcher is just the horizontal piece that ties the legs together. So let's cut those now. All right, so we got our legs, we got our stretchers. Basically, each set of legs is gonna sit like this, and it's gonna have a stretcher there, and a stretcher down here, and then it'll have the long one going this way to the other side of the table. So in order to attach those, kind of the easy, fast way to do it is to just grab a pocket hole jig and go ahead and drill a couple of those holes. So for the pocket hole jig, we're going to find the side that we want facing out and the side that we want facing up. And we are going to drill on the inside part. So we're going to set it up. I've got the jig set to 1.5 inches. I've got my bit set to 1.5 inches. Clamp it in, and we're going to drill 2 holes in it on each end. And there you have it. Pocket holes drilled on each end. This will sit in here and fasten the 2 legs together. Okay, pocket holes are drilled. Now it's time to mark where they're going to go on the legs and glue them and screw them. A little bit of glue on the ends. Okay, and then you just want to double check, make sure that you are square on there before your glue dries. Set that aside, move on to the next one. Okay, so we got the short stretchers on, time to put the long stretchers on. Okay, so we've allowed these quite a bit of time to dry, and so now it's time to pull them from the clamps and get them planed out, smoothed out, sanded, cut down to size, and ready for staining. Here we go. So now we've got the tape peeled off of there, we've got most of the glue off of there. We're gonna flatten these guys out. Now, if you have access to a planer, that's probably the quickest way to get this done. If you don't have access to a planer, a hand plane will do the trick, or a simple sander will get it done. Belt sander, orbital sander, palm sander, any of those sanders will work to get this job done. We have access to a planer, so we're gonna go ahead and throw this through. Ear protection. So again, here we have access to a drum sander. If you don't have access to a drum sander to do this final sanding, go ahead and hit it with an orbital sander. Just remember to sand through those grits. Start with say 80, move up to 120 and 220. Let's do it. So we use the planer to get them nice and flat. Then we use the drum sander to get them smooth. Again, you can use a hand plane, you can use a belt sander, you can use a hand plane, variety of tools if you don't have access to those machines in your shop. Now, what we need to do is cut these tabletops down to size so that we have So we're gonna put a quick round over on here. It's just barely gonna round it over. I've got it set up so that it's gonna just knock the edge off so that we don't have quite as sharp angles on the top. Here we go. So remember, whenever you use the router, you want to route against the way that the bit is spinning. Keep your fingers on top so that they don't fall into the bit if your board magically disappears. Okay, and now we're ready to stain. I use a simple wipe-on method with a rag, and then I take a clean rag and I wipe it all off so that we don't have splotches on the material. Okay, so off camera, I painted the bottom, the legs, and the stretchers, and I also cut a shelf to go in the bottom. It's gonna fit precisely inside of those bottom stretchers. So now we need to add some pocket holes to the bottom of this so that we can screw it in and make it strong. Okay, so for the pocket hole jig, I've set the actual jig to 3/4 of an inch because that's the thickness of our material. I've also set the collar on the bit to 3/4 of an inch So now we can just pop some screw holes in here and go to town. So I'm gonna go ahead and apply my glue to the inside of the stretcher so that when I push the shelf down, the glue pushes down with it instead of bubbling up over the top where we're gonna see it. So okay, so that's how you build a basic table. It's a table that anyone can build, and this is the table that's going to help you build better furniture in the future. All your basic furniture skills are right here. And from here, you can start making adjustments and adding some leveled up techniques to make your tables even better. Stay tuned for future videos that show some of those techniques. And if you liked what you saw, if you got value out of this, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss anything in the future. Thanks for watching.